senators who are going to be leaving during the event to go make speeches and take votes on the very issue that we are talking about today. VoteVets was started over 20 years ago in opposition to forever wars, in opposition to unconstitutional forever wars. I served in one of those wars as an infantry platoon leader, and I've seen up close and personal the unnecessary sacrifices associated with these conflicts and the incredible courage and heroism that our young people display, irrespective of the recklessness of our nation's leaders. So we want to just, first of all, thank these incredible leaders here for their courage and their foresight and for standing up for so many years on this issue. And before I introduce each of you, I just want to give each of you a round of applause for everything that you do. So I know Tammy Baldwin will be here shortly, I believe. Oh, I have to make an announcement. If any of you leave, you got to hand in your badges, okay? And your little cards, all right? They're gonna kill me if I don't announce that, all right? But I'm looking at you. You might steal it. But what we're gonna start, because it's he'll be leaving to make an announcement on the floor regarding this bill. We're gonna start with Senator Cory Booker, sir.
Thank you very much. I heard one Jersey shout out there. I want to first thank Max Rose. We sort of pulled this together, as you all know, because many of you got the word out in the last 48 hours or so. But Max is one of the great former members of Congress, somebody that's very Jersey adjacent in Staten Island. But I'm grateful for this conversation. Look, the energy that is in this room is I'm humbled by and appreciative by, but I know as somebody who I just met whose name is Joy, there's actually this understanding that joy is an act of defiance, but we all carry heavy hearts, that if America, I always say, hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. These are heartbreaking times, and the people in this room are more familiar, and frankly, our veterans who've seen combat are more familiar than anybody with the costs of war, with the high costs of war. And I've met people like Kelly who know about that ultimate sacrifice, who lost her father in war. And so this gathering really came about because of that idea. We are a nation watching Donald Trump unilaterally, unconstitutionally, take our nation towards and involve us in the largest war engagement since Afghanistan. But what we also know in this room, and so many veterans know very personally, is he's doing that, spending $1 billion a day, costing already 13 servicemen and women their lives, with over 200 visibly injured, many more with injuries you cannot see, all while also here at home cutting benefits that in particular are relied on by veterans themselves. Remember, he said, I'm going to take a chainsaw to government. Well, that really meant veterans programs. 28,000 people from the VA, many of them veterans themselves, collectively with millions of years of experience, were cut from the VA. We know right now that those cuts are being made at a time that veterans are in crisis, whether it's the 32,000 veterans in the United States of America that are unhoused. And then he continues to rack up our expenses, giving tax cuts to the wealthiest and engaging us in this war in Iran, $1 billion a day, while he's saying he has no money for things like SNAP, food stamps, which veterans disproportionately rely on. He's cutting our health care programs, including not extending the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, which knocked about 250,000 veterans off of their health care. We are at a period where the costs of this war are known by our veterans, and the cost of the cruelty of this administration, who are driving up costs for Americans at home and veterans in particular. And so I'm grateful for these colleagues I have with me today and others who are not here, because we made a determination back at the very end of February when this war started that we were not going to let him do this without a fight. And that the fight we particularly wanted to do was to force the United States Senate, supposedly the world's most deliberative body, to do its job, to not allow business as usual, to not allow them to spend billions of dollars of our treasure and the blood of our American citizens without so much as an adequate debate or hearing, oversight, or accountability whatsoever. We know, regardless of your political persuasion, the war is very unpopular. And the Senate should not just be submissive to the executive, it should actually do its job. So I'm going to hand this mic back to the congressman. I know that Adam Schiff and I are the first wave of people that are going to go up, because one of the things we said we were going to do is really following the leadership and frankly one of my mentors in the Senate, Tim Kaine, who is not just on this conflict, but also on Venezuela, has been calling these war powers resolutions to the floor. We also know that this is a president who's talking openly already about Cuba's next. Tim Kaine was the first person that said, I have a privileged right to force the Senate to consider a war powers resolution. It is his strategy that now we are collectively following, with a number of us having filed them. And I know Adam Schiff and I are going to go in about 10 minutes to introduce the war powers resolution right now. And then we're coming back to be in this room with these great servicemen and women to continue this discussion. So thank you.
Senator, thank you. So next we're going to pass the mic to the great senator from California, Adam Schiff.
Thank you so much, Max. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your service in uniform and in the House of Representatives. One of my favorite Max Rose quotes I have to share with you. I think he's laughing because he may know where I'm going with this. But I remember when there was a particularly tough vote in the House that was going to be of great consequence and great difficulty for him in Staten Island, and remarking on his courage, as had others. And Max's response, and I think he also told this to the New York Times, was, I led convoys in Iraq during the height of the surge. That required courage. This is some cushy shit. And I think that's the right perspective. If we're going to ask our service members to put themselves in harm's way, we should be willing to take a vote here in Congress. We should be willing to have an open hearing here in Congress. We should be willing to be held accountable. We should show a fraction of the courage that our service members and their families are displaying. The founders gave us the power to declare a war or to refuse to do so. This was an extraordinary thing at the time when the king or the chief executive had that power all around the world. It was a revolutionary idea. But the founders recognized that a president might grow too fond of making war and gave that power to Congress. And if we don't use that power to bring an end to this war, if we don't use that power to insist that Congress play its role in our system of checks and balances, then that power is gone for good. And that is dangerous for this country, because it means that presidents will make war on a whim, as it appears this president has done. So I'm proud to join my colleagues. I'm grateful to Tim Kaine, who has been such a leader on the War Powers Resolution. Grateful to Cory and Chris for organizing this series of War Powers Resolutions, and to Tammy B and Tammy D and all Tammys out there. So grateful for all your leadership. I'm headed to the floor and look forward to rejoining you. Thanks again.
Senator, thank you. And look, today is all about veterans and making sure that this conversation is had with veterans. And I think it should be noted that you all have just heard at least some part of the remarks that these two extraordinary senators will give on the floor of the Senate, making you some of the first Americans to have heard these remarks on this incredibly important issue. And I can think of no greater respect to each and every one of you. It's really our extraordinary privilege at VoteVets to introduce someone she considers herself, and she is OG VoteVets, was some of the original class of veterans in the Iraq and Afghanistan war to really take Congress by storm and stand up in opposition to these forever wars that unfortunately we're still seeing. So without any further ado, Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Thank you. I am so OG VoteVets that I am patient zero. I am the first candidate ever endorsed by VoteVets to run for office, and I am proud of that position. Listen, what we're doing on the floor today it is about this war. It is about the fact that we have a balance of power. We have checks and balances in our system that we have to maintain control over. But for those of us who are intimately associated with VoteVets and the veterans community, it is also about the military men and women who are our friends, who are out there today. Some of us may have retired, but we have friends and family members who are still serving, and it is beholden on each and every one of us to safeguard them so that when we do need them to fight and defend us and protect our democracy, they can do that. But you don't do it by wasting the most precious resource we have, the men and women who are willing to wear the colors of this great nation. Clap for them, clap for them. Here is one of my greatest concerns about what is happening right now. Donald Trump, through his war of choice, is not making America greater, is not making America stronger, is in fact weakening our national security. He is blowing through our weapon stockpiles. He is pulling weapon systems out of the ROK. He is shifting resources out of other parts of the Indo-Pacific into his war of choice, leaving our allies and American interests vulnerable across the globe. So this is about the war, but this is also about the fact that when the commander-in-chief of this United States makes these decisions, it is supposed to be with Congress, but it is also supposed to be in America's best national interest. And in fact, he has made us more vulnerable. He has expended precious resources, and he has no idea what his next step is and how this is going to end. And then he put into position a Secretary of Defense who, I don't know, I knew this was brought up earlier today when I was talking to one of you in the audience, who made it to the rank of major as an infantry officer without a Ranger tab, airborne wings, air assault wings, or company command. He put incompetent people in charge, and you get the result that we have right now. I served in the Iraq War, even though I didn't believe that it was the right thing for America to do, because I believed in our Constitution and our democracy. And our democracy said that our military is subservient to our civilian leadership. And I believed in that so truly that I volunteered for it. And I'm so proud to be able to serve in the Senate today with colleagues who actually had the courage to stand up and voted against the Iraq War. There's one of them being the chairwoman of the Tammy Caucus in the Senate, unanimously nominated and elected into office as the leader of the Tammy Caucus. But we need to have those tough votes. We need to have those tough discussions. And if it is time to go to war, then we will vote for it. But it is not the decision of one man's ego to do this. And that is what we're doing on the floor today. My slot on the floor is at 1740 hours. So I'm going to stay here until then, and then I'll disappear as well. But thank you all for being here. We're in this together. And this is all about the United States of America, keeping our people safe, keeping our nation safe and prosperous, and making sure that we safeguard the men and women who wear the uniform of our nation. Thanks.
It's really my honor to introduce Senator Tim Kaine as we talk about this issue, because there's an interesting thing about politics, which is it's very easy to shift from issue to issue over the course of time. There's so many things that matter, so many points of urgency. But ever since he came to Congress, Senator Kaine has made this issue of stopping forever wars and making sure that the Constitution is honored one of his top priorities. And so for that, sir, we are just so very grateful on behalf of all the veterans here, because you really respect people's service, not just by saying thank you for your service, but also by making sure that we respect and honor the process when we send them to combat. So here you go. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to Max and to the VoteVets community, all the vets community, and my colleagues. I've described my Senate career as I got here with 100 interests, 10 passions, and 1 obsession in 2013. And the obsession was we shouldn't wage war illegally and we shouldn't go into stupid wars. And that obsession grew out of being a governor from 2006 to 2010 when thousands of my Virginia Guards members were deployed repeatedly into Iraq and Afghanistan. And I went to too many funerals, and I went to too many wakes, and I went to too many deployments, and I went to homecomings where the leader of the squad couldn't say all present and accounted for when they mustered in the homecoming because somebody didn't come back. And so I decided when I got here, Max, that I'm going to do everything I can in my power to stop any illegal war, a war and run around Congress and run around the Constitution, and especially if it's stupid. And also, right, when I got here, my oldest joined the Marine Corps, so that was an additional motivation. You all serve so bravely and so patriotically, and you know, what is your biggest vulnerability? I'd argue that the biggest vulnerability may not be the exquisite weapon system that an enemy may have. The biggest vulnerability is poor decision-making by the civilian leadership that asks you to do things that they shouldn't ask you to do. And that's where we are with this war in Iran. Have we learned nothing from 25 years of wars in the Middle East? More than 14,000 dead, more than 65,000 injured, $8 billion spent. Have we learned nothing? Have we learned nothing? And we have colleagues who want to hide. They want to do all of this in classified, not having public hearings, because they're afraid to put it before the American public and let the American public ask them the questions that you would naturally have and we naturally have. They put us in classified rooms so that when we walked out of the door, knowing information, having doubts, having questions, we're handcuffed and we can't really describe. My Virginians who were deployed overseas in the Ford, way past the period of the deployment, fires raging on deck, toilets that don't work, they're supposed to be home with their families. I know things that they're asking me that I can't tell them because they only tell us in classified. And get this, we learned something really important today. Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong. In a classified hearing, Chris asked the Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chair, Jim Risch, the following. What the witnesses say is classified. What the senators say is not. And Chris said, this is fine. Classified hearing's fine. When are we going to have a public hearing about this war? When? And Senator Risch said the following. I have decided that we will not have public hearings because I do not believe the administration's decision makers should be subject to public questioning by senators. I mean, can you believe that? I'll give him credit. I'll give him credit for candor, but I mean, they do not believe that the civilian decision makers should be subject to questions by United States senators. If they were secure in the justness of their cause or the adequacy of their plan, they would not be afraid to answer public questions about what they're doing. They'll put together the video of their own greatest hits, intermixing it with Hollywood film productions and video game stuff, and put it out all day long, but they don't want to answer questions that we ask them. We are going to keep forcing them again and again and again, as much as they hate it, to have to vote on this until we finally get in public the answers that the Americans deserve. And we think if Americans get the answers, we will grow and grow and grow in a desire to end this illegal war. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hey, look at that. Hey. You know, it's really an honor to introduce Senator Chris Murphy because I can tell you from the vantage point of a veteran, former politician, I know you all feel this way. Our politicians have to make it clear, and they failed to do this in the past, that you can be pro-veteran, pro-military, pro-national security, actually believe in something, but just respect the Constitution and oppose stupid forever wars. That's possible. And Senator Murphy, I would venture to say, has been a leader in terms of forging that pathway. And for that, sir, we're just so grateful. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Max. Thank you, Max. Thanks to the whole VoteVets community. Thanks to Cory and others for helping to put this together. Tammy, for your heroism. Tim, for your leadership. I was whispering to Tim that I think Senator Risch's exact words in that closed-door hearing this morning was that it would be counterproductive to ask the administration to come here and answer questions. Okay, well, from one perspective, he's right, right? If your goal is to cover up the incompetence of this war, yes, a public hearing would be counterproductive. But asking the administration to explain its rationale for putting thousands of young men and women in harm's way for a war with no endgame is not counterproductive to the basic exercise of democracy in this country. In fact, it is required under the Constitution. The most sacred clause in that Constitution is probably the war-making clause, right? Our founding fathers took deadly seriously the question of how America gets into war and how it stays out of war. Why? Because as we have learned in Iraq and Afghanistan and other conflicts, it is impossible to put a cost on war. It is not just the lives lost. It is the infinite number of traumas that result from that young man or woman, that son or daughter that doesn't come home. It's the visible and invisible injuries that stay with you for the rest of your life. It's the choice to spend trillions of dollars fighting incompetent forever wars instead of building schools or getting people health care at home. The cost is impossible to calculate. And our founding fathers knew that that had to be a public decision. That had to be a decision that everyone in this country was involved in. So I'm so glad that we are here having this discussion. I'm going to be proud in a few minutes to join my colleagues on the floor to force a debate tonight. This is what we're doing. We're forcing an open debate in the Senate tonight on this incompetent, disastrous war. We're going to force our colleagues later tonight to go on the record. Now, maybe they won't change their votes from last week, but this war doesn't get more popular as the days go on. Their explanations don't get easier to understand as the days goes on. Less people don't get killed, more people get killed. And so, yes, it is, I think, our duty, if they are not going to have these hearings, if they are not going to have these votes, to force those votes and to convene forums like this where we can talk in front of the cameras about the consequences of this war for the American public, and in particular, the consequence of this war for those that we are asking to fight it. So, Max, to the organizers, thank you so much for making us a part of this evening. Appreciate it.
Last but certainly not least is Senator Tammy Baldwin. And I just want to really acknowledge here that while it is clear as day when it comes to this present conflict that it's potentially the least popular conflict the United States has ever engaged in, that has not been always true for past forever wars. Those are hard votes to oppose these conflicts and to hold our nation's leadership to account even when it wasn't necessarily politically advantageous. You, Senator, have always done the right thing even when it was difficult. And on behalf of all the veterans here, we just want to really thank you.
Thank you, Max, and thank you to VoteVets for bringing us all together, and for my colleagues for your leadership. I am so proud to stand with you in our separate issuing of war powers resolutions to make sure that this vote comes to the American people. You know, I was hearing Senator Kaine talking about, have we not learned our lessons? And yes, that vote against the war in Iraq was a very tough vote politically. But there's a couple of strands that I see in common there, because we had a president asking us to go to war in a preemptive strike. There was no imminent threat. There was no ongoing attack. He was asking us to say, well, there could someday be, and so we should do a preemptive strike. Was that the Bush Doctrine? Is that what we actually called it? But in any event, I want to approach this from a slightly different angle. Since this president took office for his second term, I have watched, I want to almost say daily, as he has overreached the law and violated our constitutional principles. And at first it was on domestic and budgetary issues. And I looked to my Republican colleagues and I said, please stand up. You're a senator. Stand with us and say there are limits. The president doesn't get the chance to just say, I'm going to break the law, or I'm going to violate the Constitution. I'm going to overreach time and time again. And we've had a lot of talks amongst ourselves. When is the break glass moment? Tim Kaine, to your credit, you have looked at a number of instances already and said, wow, are we really dropping bombs in the Caribbean, blowing up boats? Really, are we doing that? No congressional authorization? Did we really go into Venezuela? No congressional discussion or authorization? Are we really seeing what we're seeing right now? We were not under any imminent attack from Iran. Period. That's the only thing that would have given this president the authority to do what he did without congressional authorization, without congressional debate. And his reasoning, well, if you can call it that, the things he said, well, we're gonna go in militarily because we want to support those protesters who are standing up against the Iranian regime because the economy's bad there. A couple weeks later, he said, well, we need to go in because we need to stop their ballistic missile program. A few weeks later, he said something about the nuclear program. A few weeks later, he was talking regime change. His reasoning, or whatever we want to call that, has changed hour to hour, minute to minute, and clearly no plans of an exit strategy. No plans. He didn't foresee all of the foreseeable outcomes of what he's doing. And it's costing American lives and billions of dollars. So it's my honor to stand with my colleagues. I will too be going back up to the floor shortly to make my remarks in favor of this War Powers resolution. But in addition to calling for public hearings for Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio to come before the American public and make their case, I'm also calling on my Republican colleagues to stand up and do their jobs as senators and defend the Constitution of the United States and act as a check and a balance to a lawless president.
Thank you, Senator. And it dawned on me while you were speaking, as you spoke about those litany of lies that this administration has used to justify this war. At least the Bush administration had the decency to just push one lie constantly. This is and to the UN. I didn't think it could be even worse. So we're going to kick off with some questions. And they got me to a system here. My apologies. But Joy, we're going to start with a question from Joy Craig. Joy, are you here? All right, Joy. So my apologies. I'm going to summarize your question. But really it centers around, is this administration taking into account the impact that this will have on the veteran community? And has anything been done, and was anything done in advance of this decision to go to war to perhaps prepare for that? There we go.
I have seen, it is working. I was talking at the beginning of my statement about seeing lawless behavior, reckless behavior from this president in his second term since day one. And one of those was massive reductions in force, RIFs, makes it sanitized. They fired people who serve our veterans in the VA. It was one of the agencies slated for some of the largest reductions in force among our agencies. That to me is a clear sign of a lack of commitment to our nation's veterans, our nation's heroes. If that's what they're doing in the lead up to all of these military actions, it's clear that they're not ready. I don't think it's been adequately reported, and again, it often isn't in the fog of war. We've lost 13 American service members, but 200 plus are severely injured by this war so far. And they need to come home to a VA system that is ready to keep our promises that we made when they donned the uniform. And I don't feel like we have adequate, well, I'm not going to take the blame. I don't think this administration has kept that commitment.
I mean, I think what Tammy said was right. The slashing of the VA. Remember this, too. Donald Trump's firing spree, because the federal workforce is disproportionately veteran. Civilian workforce about 4% veteran. Federal workforce more than 20% veteran. The just mass firings and RIFs, the DOJ, the buyouts. You let people go who are probationary. A lot of probationary employees are people who finished a career in the military and then they go civilian. Even though they've been serving the country for 20 years, they're suddenly probationary mid-career. Those were the people that fired. Donald Trump has fired more veterans than any president in the history of the United States. And it's not just the VA, it's all across the federal government. So no, they didn't think one thing about what would the effect be on veterans or those injured in war when they blundered into this.
Let's welcome back Senator Booker as well. It went all right? Good, good. Yes, I love it. So the next question is from Mark from Maryland. I don't know if, Mark, you're still here. If you want to, there you are. Let's start. This question is really great because it's about the economy. What is this war doing to the economy here in the United States? And does it, let's just say, ring true to the president's promise that he would address affordability?
I think I'm next up. I'm next up on the floor, so I'll take the first crack at this. Yeah, let's just remember who's going to pay for this war, right? Who's going to bear the cost of this war? It's not the Mar-a-Lago crowd that's going to be hurt by the gas prices that are already going through the roof, the grocery prices that will be shortly behind. It's not the Mar-a-Lago kids that are going to be fighting this war, who are going to be coming back with serious injuries, right? It's the kids of poor families and middle-class families in this country who, frankly, were already struggling to keep their economic head above water, who couldn't imagine a president who would choose to layer on top of the misery of a stagnant economy purposefully higher gas prices on top of the higher prices they were already paying for his tariffs. And so it just goes to show you that this is a president who doesn't think one single day about the impact of his decision-making on regular folks. His chief economic advisor is a guy by the name of Kevin Hassett. And Kevin Hassett said about 48 hours ago that American consumers were the last thing on their mind when they made decisions about this war. I mean, sometimes they tell you the truth, right? That consumers are the last thing that were on their mind. And so the tragedy of this is that when all is said and done, our security will be weaker. Because let's just be honest about what's going to happen here. There's going to be an even harder line regime that is in charge, that is going to be more provocative in the region, that is going to be more antagonistic towards the United States. There is going to be an effort in Iran to rebuild their ballistic missile and drone capability. They'll get it back within six months. And the only actual impact of this will be that more people in America face destitution, and Iran that is more lethal and more dangerous, and families that are in a deeper hole than ever before.
I just want to add, if I can, and thank you, Chris, for going up and doing your shift on the floor. As you can see, he's one of the more persuasive speakers that we have in the Senate. I'm grateful that him and Schiff are now doing the tag team up there. But I had a meeting very recently with people that help consumers who are in debt work to manage that debt, get out of their debt. And they said to me very plainly, we are in the largest consumer debt crisis in our country's history, that there are so many people right now that are spiraling into credit card debt, 4, 5, 6 credit cards, just to try to meet the basic needs. And all these predatory companies preying upon them to try to get them into, buy this, pay later, do this, pay later, and the like. And the numbers of Americans in crisis are all-time high. And then in my conversation on the way out the door, they said, I feel like, one of them said to me, I feel like it's not just these credit card companies that are preying on the American people right now, but it's also the President of the United States. And then he looks at me and he says, the chaotic tariffs, the kicking people off their health care, the failure to extend the Affordable Care Act, the $1 trillion cut in Medicaid, all of these things are bad enough. And now we're in a war that is sending our gas prices higher, which doesn't just mean that you're paying more at the pump. It means everything from shipping costs, the things being driven by trucks across the country, and you already see companies outwardly saying, like the airline industry, we're passing this right on to the consumer. And so at a time that Donald Trump already drove people to their knees, millions of Americans losing their health insurance, drove Americans to the knees, rising costs when he said he would lower those costs on day one. Now he is doing a war of choice in an unconstitutional manner, making more consumers pay more. And then, as you all know, many also, too many, paying the ultimate cost with their lives.
Thank you. So this next question is from Kyle from Columbia, Maryland. There you are. And so just to paraphrase this question, you all are fighters and you have power. And I think we see today as an opening salvo in this struggle to hold this administration accountable. What else are you going to do after this?
So, in minority, the tools aren't what you wish, but there are tools. So these privileged resolutions are powerful ones. And there's privileged resolutions on war powers. There's privileged resolutions on arms transfers. There's privileged resolutions to demand human rights reports. There's privileged resolutions to challenge any presidential use of emergency powers. And the great thing about privileged resolutions, they take about 10 days to ripen. Once they've ripened, you can call them up anytime except when you're in the post-cloture phase of another piece of legislation, moving to a final passage vote on another piece of legislation. That's why we're able to do this war powers resolution right now in the middle of pending Senate business as they're trying to disenfranchise millions of people with the SAVE Act. We can actually interrupt it on these privileged motions. So we have a number of others queued up that we can continue to call up to force people to go on the record. We are expecting the administration possibly to send up a supplemental request for more dollars for this war. Any of these appropriations bills would require 60 votes. That's an opportunity for us to, again, shine a spotlight, start to pull people our way and convince them that this is not the right way to go. We're writing the defense bill right now. It's the one bill that will pass the Senate every year. It will come up for vote in the Senate Finance Committee, Senate Armed Services Committee in January, but we have huge opportunities as part of the defense bill to put in provisions. We've got an appropriator here. Appropriations has tools. The Republicans might try a reconciliation bill this year, which they can try to push through. In reconciliation, we get an opportunity both in committee and on the floor to do a vote-a-rama, bring up any amendment that we want until we're done offering amendments. So there's 4 or 5 different legislative strategies that is the inside congressional game. And this group, we are committed to using every last one to demonstrate the foolishness of this war, the illegality of the war, with the thought that the more we do it, the more American public agrees with us, the more they're going to talk to their members of Congress and senators, and then we can start pulling some more votes our way. That's the goal.
I'm going to talk or try to answer that question. It's like big picture and then drill down and really underscore a lot of what Senator Kaine just said. But when you have a lawless president, there are, beyond the Congress, certain tools we have to fight back. And they're not necessarily quick, and they don't necessarily always work. But I would argue that they are the courts, they are the Congress, they are our states and local communities. You know, our local communities can pass laws and states can pass laws that can counterbalance what's happening at the federal government level. And then there's the people organizing, speaking out. And they kind of all work together in some ways. And so I always want to keep my eye on the big picture. There's certain things we can do in Congress that empower the people, like demanding these hearings that we're demanding. Get Hegseth, get Rubio sitting in front of one of our committees, testifying in public. That may get more people across the United States calling our Republican colleagues saying, you've got to stand up. You've got to be a check and a balance to this rogue administration. And so it does all work together. But, you know, I was proud to join Cory when he led us all with this idea of let's not just have one war powers resolution submitted and waiting to get considered. Let's a bunch of us write our own and put it in there. So every time we want to ratchet up the heat just a bit or the attention just a bit, we can call another one up to the floor. And so thank you today. It's yours. And I'm about to go up and speak to it. My slot's right after Tim Kaine, so I'm going to. But that's, you know, we've got to use every tool. But it doesn't end with the Senate or the Congress. That is just a part of a larger puzzle of how a democracy figures out how to preserve itself, and that's what we're looking at.
If I could just add one more tool that we're going to use, which is we're going to beat these bastards in the next election as well. So the next question comes from David, also from Maryland. We got a great Maryland contingent here today.
Where's David? Is David here? Has David left? Oh,
There
David's
he
there. Okay.
And what David's question points to is what can we do to start to protect our service members and our veterans and our communities from recklessness like this in the future? David brings up the question of do we need a new AUMF? Should we repeal prior AUMFs? What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen ever again?
So the answer is yes, all of the above. And David, I want to be very clear with you. As much as all those things that Tim Kaine and the chairwoman of the Tammy Caucus said, all the things that they said, it is not as powerful as what we do collectively as the people. The power of the people is always greater than the people in power in a democracy. And we are still a democratic republic. And so the reason why the first idea, as Tammy generously said, when I watched what Tim Kaine and his leadership did, me and Murphy started talking about, well, let's take Tim's strategy and turn it up a lot bigger and have a whole bunch of these lined up to use every privilege we have to not let the Senate have business as usual. You all know What the Republicans want to be talking about is something called the SAVE Act, which is not saving anything. It would be costing people literally a new poll taxes. It would federalize elections and more. They want to be talking about that. They don't want to be talking about the war, the high cost of war, the soldiers who are giving the ultimate sacrifice and more. But the reason why I talk about the power of the people is this. Jefferson said this very clearly. When people are afraid of their government, there's tyranny. When the government is afraid of people, there is liberty. Why is Congress not working right now? Why is Republican-controlled House and the Senate bending their knee and doing whatever Donald Trump wants them to do, handing over their powers to the executive and against constitutional mandates? Why? Because they're more afraid of him than they are the people they represent. And I know this because their policies are not popular with the people that they represent. This war is not popular. But somehow our voices have got to get stronger and more demanding so that we can begin to hold our politicians more to account. And there are forces against us, y'all. You know that. We've had the complete corruption of our politics by big money, and now billionaires don't even need to spend money. They can just threaten a Republican. If you don't vote for an unqualified Secretary of Defense, I will put $20 million in a primary against you. We are up against forces that nobody else was before for the will of the people to prevail, but that still doesn't mean we're powerless. So I'm asking everybody here, I'm telling you right now, the reason why we're having this is because we're showing folks that there's a handful of senators here that are determined to do things differently, to try new things, to fight with more tools and everything we can. But at the end of the day, we wanted to start with this, with veterans, because your voices are some of the most powerful that there are, especially in times of unjust war. Because you've done what I haven't done, and you've certainly done what a draft-dodging president of the United States hasn't done, which is serve your country in combat. And so when you stand up and give those 6 powerful words, let me tell you a story, and talk from your own personal experience, it makes a difference. It ignites other people. It calls people to courage. And that's what we need in addition to a handful of senators exercising the levers of power they have. Thank you.
Amazing. So, Senator, this next question's from Hal from Virginia. Hal Donahue. You hear Hal?
Hal, all right.
Hey, that's my father's
And
name.
Hal
That's a great name. And Hal's got a great question. You know, so many veterans, myself included, know people that are still serving. I've got friends stationed in the Middle East right now. We all are searching for an understanding of, does this president have an off-ramp? Did they plan for a way for this to end where our soldiers are still supported and respected and there's some sense of long-term security? We all feel so confused and scared right now. Did they have a plan, and where do you see this going now?
So they do not have a plan. I say that, but people would expect me to say that. This is why we want hearings. Let the American people cross-examine the people who have taken us to war to ask them the questions that we've been asking in classified settings and have not gotten satisfactory answers. And as they jump around from answer to answer about what the end state they exist, you all have heard it. First, it was regime change. Now it's to stop their ballistic missiles programs or to stop their ability to race to a nuclear weapon. I've heard numerous end states that they want. Well, I also know from classified conversations what it would take to achieve these things. Would it take boots on the ground? How many American lives? How long would this take? Those questions are not being answered. Our country was designed so that you could have Congress give checks, balances, oversight, and give transparency and accountability to the executive. And I was in that meeting that Tim Kaine referenced earlier, that Chris Murphy asked that powerful question where the chairman of the committee said, I do not want to subject these people to cross-examination before public. It was so jarring to me, my head turned around to look because I couldn't believe he said that out loud. That what are they afraid of? They're afraid of accountability. What are they afraid of? They're afraid of being exposed, that there was no justified provocation that got us into this war, and that they do not have a plan, a substantive plan, to get us out of this war with achieving any of the strategic objectives that one might argue are important. And so this is, to me, the outrage of all of this, is that we have a job to do in Congress, but we have Republican leadership that is blocking that. And to stop this from ever happening again, when will we learn our lesson? This feels like Groundhog Day with yet another president rushing us into a war with no plan whatsoever that's going to take away the greatest treasure of our country as well as the greatest value of our nation. That is the men and women brave enough to volunteer to serve it in the armed forces.
Thank you. You know, and then we're gonna close this out.
That's great.
That's an amazing point. So we have tickets for everybody here to join the Senate gallery to watch this debate. I want to highlight something that Senator Booker just said. We talk a lot about the Constitution, and we talk a lot about the necessity and the requirement that Congress approves any declaration of war. We don't talk a lot about why that's so important. The reason why that's so important, because it is a check that the administration, that the commander-in-chief actually has a plan. Right, has actually thought about how they're going to defend bases in the region, has actually thought about what they're going to do about low-cost drones, has actually thought about how they're going to move troops through the region, has actually thought about what they're going to do about the troops on the USS Ford who have already been deployed for well over a year. This is why this process matters, not just because it's printed on some document from hundreds of years ago. So before we all march over to the Senate, which again is absolutely amazing, first of all, I just want to thank again the incredible VoteVets staff who put this whole thing together, the staff and the volunteers. Let's give them all a round of applause. And then we have just one last question for Senator Booker, which is, what is your message to veterans across the country today?
The last words of my greatest mentor, he was ailing and in hospice, and I would go to see him, and he was a leader in my city who had kept, housing activists, kept thousands of people in their housing, heat and hot water. I used to be upset that nobody else was there visiting him, but I realized his joy and the peace he had in the final hours of his life, that to him life wasn't about celebrity, it was about significance. It wasn't about popularity, it was about purpose. It wasn't about how many people show up there for you when you're dead, but how many people you show up for when you're alive. A lot of folks in this room know the humble nature, humility of our men and women who serve. That's the kind of devotion that they have. His last words to me when I went in to say my goodbyes, he had gone blind in his illness, and they told me he wouldn't be able to talk, but when I walked in, I announced myself so he could hear me to say my final goodbye, and he forces out these words, "I see you," he said. And then I sat with him and hugged him and kissed him and told him how grateful I was for all his impact on my life, one of my great life mentors. But I had to go. I was mayor of the city. I was busy. I had to leave. So I held him one more time, squeezed him so he could feel me, embrace him, kissed him on the cheek and the forehead, and I said, "I love you." I could see him smile and the warmth over his face. But as I got up, he wanted to say it. And again, he forces out the words, "I love you." The final words of one of my greatest mentors are really what I want to say to our veterans and our families of veterans, and those who've lost people along the way, is, "I see you, I love you. I see you, I love you. I see you, I love you." I was raised that love is not sentimentality. It is not saccharine. Love is what our veterans have shown. Love is sacrifice. Love is service. Love is devotion to one another and to what we stand for. Our veterans, our soldiers serving right now, have shown that devotion and that love. Our leaders should not treat them as if they're disposable. Our leaders should understand the full consequence of sending men and women into war. Our founders did not want that decision on any one individual. They wanted the gravity of such a choice to weigh on the American people and their representatives in Congress. If we are to live up to the ideals of my greatest mentor, to see one another, to love one another, then we would not be yet in another Middle East war in a way that shreds our constitutional traditions and undermines our greatest values. The words over the Senate, which you're going to see when you go into the gallery, look at the presiding officer, look over his head. In another New Jersey, and Andy Kim, his maiden speech, he said that those three words, he wanted to know where they came from, and he found that they came from the great leader Cicero. But they're not a full sentence. E pluribus unum is sort of the last clause in a greater sentence. And he said Cicero's complete sentence is, we must love one another. We must love our neighbor so that we can make one from the many. This is where we are in America right now. Are we loving each other enough that we understand our sacred obligations to one another? We understand the gravity of every life created equal? Do we know truly that to uphold the Constitution is to uphold something that is civically sacred? This is what we're fighting for, so that our generations to come do not have to suffer the same consequence of decisions made by those who clearly do not love this nation as much as those who have served it and fallen for it. Thank you. Please come with me. I'm going to rush back to the floor to get into this debate and discussion. I'm so grateful to everybody who came on a small notice to be here, and I'm so happy I got a chance to meet a lot of folks as well for the first time.
You can get the pass to go to the Senate chamber. So in the back of the room right here. You good? All right. Sounds good? Thank you.
Just turn in your badge and get your gallery pass.